Okay, well then here, let me just offer a little bit of a challenge here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bring it.
Oh, I like that, dude. That was pretty.
Even though the sun comes up every morning in the east and goes down every morning in the west, so they have a potential lock-on.
What did the Mesoamerican people
day,
do to you? Who hurt you, Rod? Who hurt you, Rod?
Listen,
so that you're like this. Because you cannot just like, debunk these cats.
I'm spending money like I just got paid. $100 bills, tell them keep the change. Come on.
What about that whole area that's infested with snakes? Whoa.
Okay. Pop a bottle about to make it rain. Let me give you something now to celebrate. Come on.
None of us has seen a dragon. That could have been just a Jewish idiom.
They probably were talking about buffalo.
And if you're wondering why I move the way I do, I just feel so good.
What animal is a sufficient quantity of them that you could feed tens of thousands of humans?
The Louisiana Purchase is a huge area.
And what else is in there? Oh my gosh, elephants. Like lots of them.
The following is an episode of Ward Radio and does not represent the thoughts or the opinions of KHTS, its owners, or any of its affiliates, nor does it represent the official opinion of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. With that said, sit back, relax, and enjoy the program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to Ward Radio. I am your host, Cardinalist. Today I'm joined in the studio by Bril Hernandez of the Firm Foundation, as well as Rod Meldrum, the Heartlander of Heartlanders, the Heartlander in Chief, the hippest Heartlander that we have in this hemisphere. That's a killer alliteration right there. You know what I'm saying? And I just came up with it. And today we are talking, the hippest holy man in the Heartlander hemisphere. You know,
should see his pants.
Yeah, today we're going to be able to talk, or today we're going to be talking about plants and animals of the Book of Mormon, according to the Heartlander theory, because there's a little bit of friction between the Mesoamerican guys and the Heartlander dudes as to what the plants and animals of the Book of Mormon are. We're not just talking Kurlams and Kumams here, all right? So, Rod Meldrum, tell us what's up with the plants and animals, especially the horses, you know what I'm saying?
Of course.
Of the Book of Mormon, man. Hit us up.
All right, well, let's go to the scriptures, actually. Let's pull up here in 1 Nephi chapter 18, the last couple of verses here. It says, "And it came to pass that we did find upon the land of promise, as we journeyed in the wilderness, that there were beasts in the forest of every kind, both the cow and the ox and the ass and the horse and the goat and the wild goat, and all manner of wild animals which were for the use of men. And we did find all manner of ore, both gold and silver and copper." We're going to talk about the metallurgy in another time.
Okay, rock on.
But anyway, so this is a list of animals. But what I find is fascinating, and this is something that nobody really had ever addressed before that I've ever seen, as far as in the Mesoamerica research and models and so forth, is addressing these animals. Now, I would say addressing them has been done. John Sorensen actually made a list in his book, Ancient American Setting for the Book of Mormon. He made a list of animals in the Book of Mormon, and then what he called candidate animals on the scene, which were
candidate animals on the scene.
Yeah.
That literally sounds like a band out of the early 2000s. Like a boy, that's like a K-pop band that was just mistranslated as it came to America. Candidate animals on the scene.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, baby. But interestingly enough, though, so there was a lady by the name of Amberly Nelson that actually did a lot of this original research and addressed something that nobody's ever really done before. And that is, throughout the Book of Mormon, these Hebrews, talk about that they were living the laws of Moses. And the laws of Moses have some very specific plants and animals that are required in order to live it. For example, it's pretty important that you have sheep to offer as sacrifices, right? You have to have goats. That's part of their sacrifice as well. You also have to have certain plants and so forth, like barley and grapes and so forth, to be able to do that. So you also and you don't just need a few of them; you need a lot of them.
You also have a way of living, and certain types of buildings style of It's not just like pyramids.
Yeah, you're not supposed to have two different types of woven fabrics together.
Yeah.
There's actually animals you also should avoid that you can't touch that are unclean.
Right.
Besides the one that you should sacrifice, they're the ones that you shouldn't associate with. Yeah, there's all kinds of cool rules written in Deuteronomy.
Yeah. So one of the things that has been really another kick in the teeth to the church is that the plants and animals that are mentioned in the Book of Mormon aren't indigenous to Central America. For example, they've never found any evidence for sheep or goats in the frescoes or on the artwork or any of that kind of stuff. But they still a lot of other animals in those things, but those are absent.
Yeah, but also like, for example, if I were some English explorer that came for the first time to Louisiana or whatever, and there was a platypus there, like, I mean, I may not correctly call it a platypus because maybe there's not a platypus in my hometown of Glasgow. Okay. But I'm going to see it and I might say, it's a water duck, or it's a rat duck or something. And just because that's what I see through the gift and power of God, as Joseph Smith is translating, doesn't necessarily mean it's a mistranslation. I don't know. To me, I don't know. I mean, I'm hearing what you're saying, but I'm also thinking, couldn't it just be he was using the best word at the time because the word doesn't matter too much?
Well, whose word are you talking about, though? Are we talking about Mormon and Moroni's word? Are we talking about Joseph Smith's word? Are we talking about the Lord's word? Because one of them would have to be wrong if they said that. And it's not like
fair enough.
It's not like the Hebrews were ignorant about what a sheep or a goat was. I mean, they had them over in the old world. We know that. If Mormon and Moroni knew what a sheep or a goat was, and they put that down in the record, and then Joseph Smith translates it, it's pretty hard to imagine that he couldn't get that right, because Joseph knew what sheep and goats were. What would be hard to understand is how a sheep would be
misconstrued.
Actually, that they wouldn't know what that was. Like a platypus. I mean, I love your example because there's some animals that like, what is a wallaby?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, that would show you pretty closely that if you find kangaroo in that it didn't happen in either North America or Central America, because there's no kangaroos.
That's just an Australian deer.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
But I also can see, though, some things like, for example, in the Book of Mormon, it talks about horses, right? They talk about horses. Now, they didn't say that there was horses for everybody. In fact, it kind of seems like maybe just the royalty had horses. I don't think it seemed like there's no place in the Book of Mormon that said, and we did, ride our horses into battle or whatever,
It's not like in the San Gabriel Mountains where they still have entire, not fleet. What are they called? Not packs. Herds. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, herds
of wild horses just running around in the mountains. Okay.
Yeah, the time when we find about that people had horses, I mean, think of King Lamoni, for example. I mean, he had some horses. They had some chariots, right? That kind of thing. Well, you need horses to pull the chariots, but chariots are not really that highly useful unless you have actual roads, because the vegetation back east is so thick that having an actual vehicle that you have to have a clearance of 4 or 5 feet or whatever to get through that stuff. Oh my gosh, it'd be less pain in the behind to just walk.
Okay, yeah, I hear you. Okay,
you can't drag this thing through the thick brush, back there. But when it comes down to the horses, so goats and wild goats and so forth are things that are definitely in the Book of Mormon, and they also happen to be indigenous to North America. You take a look at, we have several different kinds of goats. We have, Rocky Mountain goats, for example. There's other kinds of sheep. There's, Dall sheep and desert bighorn sheep, and there's all kinds of sheep in that sense. Were they back east? And the answer is yes. We have actually archaeological evidence in New York and other places that they've actually found sheep bones within the mounds of the Hopewell mound builder people. So
really, was it the same kind of species of sheep that existed in other continents? Like, for example, the black widow spider is ubiquitous worldwide. It is literally present everywhere, in every single continent on Earth, and has been there forever because they balloon. They actually go up into the stratosphere and then they come down with their little small filaments that come out of their abdomens, and that's how they propagate. Yeah. Whereas with the oceanic separation of the North American and South American continent from the African, the European, the Eurasian, and the Asian continent, it seems like, some mistaken stray sheep landing in America would be unlikely unless there was an indigenous breed that was here. Are you saying these are indigenous breeds or brought over breeds anciently that we're unaware of?
Well, more than likely, if the biblical account of the flood is accurate, then these animals would have been brought basically with them, probably by the Jaredites. because if everything was wiped out at the time of the flood, right, all mammals would have died, obviously, in that case. And so the only ones that were left were the ones we brought back here, either by them or by other people who came over. And in the case of the Mayans, for example, I mean, we know that they're Asiatic people. They came from the Japheth line. So that was probably a different migration that maybe would have brought sheep along there, even possibly over the Bering Strait, for example, around through Alaska and then down through Canada and into the United States. So there's that aspect of it. But the sheep and the goats are just one thing. It talks about cows, and actually I have I've looked up in Coronado's when he came.
Okay. And
he actually talks about the cows, and I have several quotes and so forth about that. About the cows at their leisure that they found. More than likely, probably we're talking about buffalo and or bison, and that's another interesting little feature about that, because when I was doing this research, this is from Alma chapter 22 verse 31, and it talked about these animals. It says the wilderness, which is filled with all manner of wild animals of every kind, a part of which had come from the land northward looking for food. Okay.
Oh wow. Okay.
If they came from the land northward, that sounds like that's not a small distance. They're coming from a different region, basically.
They wouldn't mention
and they're looking for food.
I remember the first time I saw a parrot in San Diego. I was like, whoa, that is a tropical, like straight up tropical bird that you just don't see flying around North America. Like
anymore.
I remember it just like really hit me when I saw a wild parrot in San Diego. I was like, oh my gosh, we actually have a tropical bird within the borders of the United States, because we generally perceive the United States as a very North American, like Yellowstone-y kind of country. You don't really think that in the south of California, there's going to be a straight up parrot flying around while I visit my cousin at UC San Diego.
Here's another layer that I don't think people consider, is that the grasslands of the United States were prolific back then. Even in the 1800s, they were prolific more so than they are now, because of all the cattle that have grazed them. Like the savanna in the South is not what it is today than it was back then. There was huge grasslands across the savannas and all those areas.
What animals does this justify, or does this describe? Are you saying like bison, famously, that were part of the Plains Indians, hunting grounds and so on and so forth?
Let me jump into that for just a second. So here in Mosiah chapter 18, it says that Mormon described how the land of Mormon was, quote, infested by times or at seasons by wild beasts. So it was a seasonal thing. Right, so that kind of sounds again like some kind of a migration. In Ether chapter 9 verse 34, it says, the people did follow the course of the beasts, and to devour the carcasses of them which fell by the way. So this is actually really fascinating, because you have three different examples here of some beasts coming from the land northward. They had a course that they followed, and they were infested at certain seasons. That sounds like migrating beasts to me. And the interesting thing is that in the Book of Mormon, it also says that there were at this point there were tens of thousands of people, and they say that many of them did eat nothing but raw meat. So if they were in Central America and there's tens of thousands of people and all they were eating was raw meat, that is a lot of monkeys.
That's that's true, man.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, what animal is a sufficient quantity of them that you could feed tens of thousands of humans on that animal in Central America?
And also, what population
do they migrate? Sorry.
Yeah, well, what population of 10,000 humans has ever been religiously disciplined enough to avoid the fresh fruit around them? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, wow. Okay, keep going.
Why would they be limited to just raw meat? And also, when it comes down to raw meat, that a lot of people think, oh, that's kind of disgusting. They do what? They go up, they kill this animal, and they go over there and start gnawing on its leg.
Yeah.
And actually, if you think about it, that is a almost perfect description. In fact, it says that they did wander about in the wilderness with a loin skin across, a loin thing over their loins, basically. And
the Indians air drying the carcasses of deer and things like that to preserve the meat is incredible.
This is called jerky. That's what it is. All it is wind. It's not over a fire. It's wind dried.
Okay.
Which is how they did it on the plains. That's what the Native Americans were doing. It says they were wandering about in the wilderness in tents. Okay.
We interrupt this broadcast to put a
teepees.
plug in for Jack's Links Turkey Jerky, North American. No, I'm just kidding. All right.
This is not turkey jerky. This is the good stuff.
The good stuff.
This is bison jerky, man. We're talking the best. Okay. So, so they have these. I was thinking about that. Well, what animals is there that migrate in Central America? So I actually got a hold of some Mesoamerica experts on animals and said, what migrating beasts are there that we could possibly qualify that in Central America? And he said, there's no migrating beasts. I said, well, okay. He said, that's even a dumb question, because the fact that the reason why beasts migrate is because of changing seasons. And in Mesoamerica, you don't have changing seasons. You have kind of a wet season and a dry season, but that's not enough to make animals move. On the other hand, in Africa and here in North America, you have these animals which are literally migrating, almost 1,000 miles.
Yeah, isn't like the seventh natural wonder of the world the migration of the Serengeti?
Yeah.
Isn't that like,
one of the seven natural wonders of the world? Yeah. There used to be, in fact, different books have said different things, but between 30 and 60 million bison or buffalo on the plains, and they were all kind of stuck on the west side of the Mississippi River, except for a few that actually way up north in Wisconsin. There was a place called Buffalo County, and when the buffalo herds would cross up there, it would take them 2 weeks to cross just a continuous stream of buffalo crossing the river up there into the on the east side of the Mississippi River. So the vast majority of these were on the west side, and
wow, okay,
and an 1,800-pound bull buffalo. How many people will that feed?
Yeah,
and if you got 30 million of
thousands,
them,
yeah.
And it's interesting because in the Book of Mormon you have the Lamanites and the Nephites. The Nephites are kind of the farmers. Okay, they talk about agriculture and they were farming and stuff. They were kind of sedentary. They had cities and so forth. And the Nephites, from the Nephite perspective, the Lamanites were kind of a wild and ferocious people. They were wandering around in the wilderness with these loin skins and so forth, and living in tents. Dude, that is like the quintessential description of the Plains Indians.
Okay.
They're wandering around in the wilderness, basically out in the
I'm pulling up the map right here of the original extent of the buffalo herds, the range in 1870, and then the range in 1889. I mean, it basically looks like they were cut into less than 10% within just 19 years.
Yeah, in 19
That's
years.
brutal.
Down to almost 1,500 out of the herds of between 30 and 60 million bison. And because the United States government figured out pretty quickly, if you want to bring this people to its knees, all you got to do is take away its supply of food. Everything in their whole culture was based on the buffalo. The skins were used, the animals, the meat was used, even the dung was used for firewood, basically, because out on the plains, there's not much trees.
Yeah, you can just burn it,
And you can just burn the dung, right? Everything in it, but this is interesting, though. What other culture is there in the world, really, that can fully live off of one animal?
I would say the Bedouin that Lehi was familiar with, and their association with camels. No, they would use the dung for fire. The camel's milk is extremely nutritious.
Yep.
The young that they give birth to are actually what you eat. You don't eat the older birthing camels. You eat the young ones.
Right.
That are, I think, less than 8 months old. If they're going to slaughter a camel, it's generally one of the younger ones. And so you could get, so I would literally say, except for maybe the Bedouin culture, that the merchant class of Jews in ancient Israel, a la 600 BC, took advantage of, also known as Lehi and his family.
Yeah.
Except for the Lehites in ancient Israel, because that's a very deserty kind of arid environment, similar to how the great North American plains would be. Those are the only two cultures I'm aware of, at least with my exposure, that really would have that close of an association to a single species of animal that would become basically mutually dependent upon.
But I would partially disagree with what you just said with the North American.
Well, I'm going to partially mute you. No, I'm just kidding.
because again, it goes back to the grasslands. Like we have, so what large piece of land did the United States buy around the 1800s?
I think buy is a very Louisiana. It did technically buy Louisiana from Napoleon.
Yes.
I don't know if I'd say some of the other conquest was purchase
for a bucket of change.
Right.
Yeah, like
And so the Louisiana Purchase is a huge area.
Yeah.
And those have the predominant grasslands. And what we know today as arid, as you mentioned, was not what it's like back then. This was literally a promised land, because all of these areas were a grassland. They were flourishing with life. They had huge tall grasses,
and when you eliminate
Georgia.
Yeah, when you eliminate the megafauna, the vegetation does not thrive. It actually oftentimes does worse.
Yeah.
Wow, geez. This is super interesting. Keep going.
Yeah, so there's a few other things that we want to chat about real quick before we run out of time here, but that is one of the big questions everybody has. Horses.
Oh, yeah. Well, hit the horses.
Okay.
Hit the horses.
So
man.
what about horses?
I like horses.
Yeah,
Let's not hit them.
Oh, no, yeah.
Or eat them. In Italy, they actually eat the horses.
Hey, no,
Cavallo.
dude, you remember when Stouffer's lasagna got busted for having horse meat in it?
No,
What?
I don't
I didn't
remember.
realize that.
There was some kind of.
don't be dissing on
I'm not going to
Stouffer's. Come
defame
on.
Stouffer's. No, I'm looking up, but I'm going to fact check myself if that wasn't just.
Hey, we all know that horses are used for glue.
Okay.
That's
Ooh,
right.
that's rough.
And Jello.
Okay, so I'm
Mormon
literally
Jello.
looking up.
The green.
Oh yeah, look,
green.
Wikipedia, the 2013 horse meat scandal. Look right
Oh,
here.
wow.
The 2013 horse meat scandal was a food industry scandal in parts of Europe in which foods advertised as containing beef were found to contain undeclared or improperly declared horse meat, such as 100% of the meat content in some cases. And then the issue came to light in 2013. Okay, so maybe it wasn't Stouffer's. I'll have to make sure.
Stouffer's.
I'll have to make sure.
Better recant that.
Yeah, I was about to say, don't sue me, Stouffer's. It wasn't you. But anyway, I'll have to edit that out. But yeah, there's a 2013 horse meat scandal. Okay, so keep going.
And speaking of horse meat scandals.
Yeah, we're just into bonus materials now. This is not going on the radio.
Okay,
So just keep going. Take your time.
Okay, so the basic deal with the horses is that they have never been found in Central America. So we have no evidence that there was horses, ubiquitous. But
Well, what about these Scripture Central articles that are coming out with like the University of Texas showing that there were indeed ancient
right,
horses?
but did they say where those horses were found?
I thought it was in Texas, right?
Yeah, it was in Texas. It wasn't in Central America. That's the point. Okay.
You don't think though that
But just down the road here,
but you don't think they're migratory patterns? If you can survive in the south tip of Texas, you can survive in most of the East Coast, almost down to the Yucatan of Mexico,
The
right?
question isn't whether it can survive. The question is whether it was here.
Okay, fair enough.
So the bottom line is that look at the La Brea tar pits just right over here in California.
Right.
I mean,
rock on.
there's like all kinds of horses there, right? And what else is in there? Oh my gosh, elephants, like lots of them, like plenty of elephants.
We prefer to call them mastodons.
Yes, but
no,
it's in the elephant family, right? So whether
Yeah.
it's mastodons or
And
mammoths,
there were some that were found up by where we live, up in Fairview.
yeah, in
All
Fairview, yeah.
across the Manti-Lisal Wasatch front, there's remains of elephants.
And every natural history museum worth its salt, I should say, maybe I shouldn't say that, has elephant bones, elephant-like animal bones. I mean, there's fully articulated elephants in Ohio, in
Wow.
Florida. Every state they have them, but we don't have elephants now. Or elephant-like creatures. Where's the mastodons and so forth? Where's all their bones? I mean, a lot of them are in the museums. But the Book of Mormon actually talks about elephants. But who was it? Was it the Nephites or was it the Jaredites that talked about having elephants and Curulams and Cumulons? By the way,
That was the Jaredites.
right. The Nephites never mentioned elephants.
Okay.
The Jaredites hunted the elephants to extinction, or at least close to extinction. Maybe not complete extinction, but they hunted
Does it say
them
that in Book of Mormon? I don't
primarily.
recall that.
No, it doesn't. But the Nephites never mention them, but the Jaredites do.
Okay.
And archaeologically, basically, or I should say, if you go back in time, they say that the elephants disappeared here. According to mainstream science, they said they disappeared around 10,000 years ago, which is actually before Adam and Eve and whatever. But it also happens to be that there are the Hopewell artifacts that have elephants inscribed on the stones. And we know that the Hopewell mound builder people were here. By the way, this is an interesting correlation. The Hopewell mound builder people begin to show up in the archaeological record down around Florida area, about right around 500 to 600 BC. And then they crescendoed into a massive civilization in the heartland of America. That's why we call it the heartland model. It's not because of the soup, although they do make good soup at Campbell's.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then they grow into this massive civilization that has roads and cities and get this. How many mounds did the Hopewell mound builders build?
Oh, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, right?
Yeah, and more.
Okay.
One of the latest books, I don't have it with me because we're here at your studio, but it's called the Illustrated Encyclopedia of Native American Mounds and Earthworks. It was written by a whole bunch of non-Mormons, right? They have nothing to do with this. They don't have an animal in this or a dog in this fight.
Yeah.
Okay, and they say on page 3 that the biggest question they always get is how many mounds were there? They said, well, the map that the Bureau of Ethnology did back in 1890 had over 250,000 mounds in the heartland of America. But they said, but based on the information that we now have today, there's over 1 million mound sites, and many of those sites have 3 or 4 mounds. So we're talking 2 to 3 million mounds. The amount of earth that was moved by the Hopewell mound builder people is commensurate with the effort that was put into the Great Wall of China, the Great Pyramid of Giza, or any other massive earthworks.
This is the most
in the entire world.
This is the most overlooked civilization in freaking the world, man. If they're moving that much earth, second maybe only to the pyramids in Giza.
No,
like
more
you
than
can't.
that.
You can't.
More than that.
Yeah, more
the
than
labor
that.
that would
Hands
take to
down.
make 2 or 3 million of these mounds was more than the labor that took to make the Great Pyramids of Giza.
You are #America. I love this. No, our mysterious culture that's ununderstood is better than their mysterious. Like, dude, are you kidding me? Are you knocking the home team? You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So the animals and the plants, and we haven't even talked about the plants yet, but every animal that is mentioned in the Book of Mormon is indigenous to North America and amazingly absent, except for dogs and wolves. Dogs are both mentioned. Dogs are mentioned in the Book of Mormon, and actually have in Illinois. There's a museum there, and they have literally a dog that was preserved, and it's a regular canine.
Okay.
And it was in the Hopewell Mound Builders stuff. It was in the Dixon Museum there in Illinois. And I think it's still there. And also wolves are mentioned in the Book of Mormon. It had wolves in sheep's clothing. They're actually mentioned that wolves in sheep's clothing. In order to understand that, you have to have both wolves and sheep, right?
Okay.
In Mesoamerica, they had no wolves and no sheep.
Well, we talk about dragons, and none of us has seen a dragon. That could have been just a Jewish idiom that came over from hundreds of years ago. Just like we talk about dragons, and none of us have seen a dragon since
they fought like
1910.
dragons. Yeah, they said that they talked about they fought like dragons. So
okay, well then here, let me just offer a little bit of a challenge here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bring it.
Oh, I like that, dude. That was pretty savage. Here's Rod Meldrum's audition tape for the Sons of Anarchy 2024. You know what I'm saying? Do you remember that show?
Yeah.
So yeah, they filmed that around here. So actually, I know people whose houses are like totally in that. It's pretty funny. Okay. So,
oh, by the way, when we say horses, we mean horses like horses, and we think that when God said sheep, he meant sheep, like we mean sheep.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So now. Here's a problem that I have with, like, this is all making sense. First off, everything you say about, like bison, horses, goats, sheep, so on and so forth, makes sense. Some of these Mesoamerican animals that they try and say they were, like the paca and the agouti, and like, famously there's this tapers of horses argument and so on and so forth. It kind of seems like they're trying to fit a circular peg into a square hole, even though it might fit because, linguistically, who's to say that's not how it's translated? I'm not dogging on those guys. All right.
They're trying to beat, as it were, a dead taper.
Okay. Yes, I get what you're saying. So, as much as that kind of comes across a little bit to me as like trying to fit a round peg in a square hole or whatever that analogy is that I'm botching.
Dead
okay.
taper.
There's some things about the North American model that don't make sense to me, where the Mesoamerican model makes sense. What about that whole area that's infested with snakes? Like, if we're really trying to say that, okay, we think the Plains Indians and the Hopewell and the Adena Indians could have been those who were traveling all up this map that you see on Wikipedia, okay, that is the entire range of the original bison herds of old, okay, that goes literally from nearly the Yukon, okay, up in Canada, all the way down to some of the coldest, most frigid and worst parts of Arizona and the Four Corners area, okay? What about that big infestation of snakes that shows up in, what is it, like 4th Nephi, where it says like the whole entire land was infested with snakes and so on and so forth? In the freezing tundra of Detroit and Milwaukee, I'm not aware of any widespread populations of massive snakes that just came crawling out of the bushes. Like, that seems a little bit more like a Mesoamerican thing, right?
I can see that, but that particular reference has to do with the narrow neck of land. It was close to the narrow neck of land where they had these snakes and so forth that came through, right? The serpents they called them.
Okay.
And if the narrow neck of land is what we are proposing, which is essentially, and this is a longer conversation, but just to just make it as short and sweet as possible, if Lake Michigan on the west was sea west,
okay,
and if Lake Erie was sea east,
okay.
Or excuse me, sea south, okay, and then you have Lake Ontario as sea east. That's what we are proposing. Okay. As the large bodies of water that are numerously mentioned in the Book of Mormon. Okay. And the lake levels we know were about 50 feet higher geologically back in the day.
Really?
The Book of Mormon.
Okay.
That extended both the Lake Michigan and Lake Erie out, because this area is so flat that if you add 50 feet of elevation to the water levels, it extends them way out. So take a look at, and if you want to pull up the Great Black Swamp, for example.
Oh, okay. The Great Black Swamp. I'm on it right now.
How many people have heard of that?
And another thing is that there are snakes in the heartland. And there are snakes all across that area. I mean, you have the prairie king snakes, and you have copperheads, and you even have rattlesnakes out there.
Yeah.
You know, there are plenty of snakes all across the heartland. I came across plenty of snakes while I was hiking, living in Kansas City alone.
Okay, yeah, so here, according to Wikipedia,
so there we go,
is the Great Black Swamp in eastern Indiana and northern Ohio. And I assume that would be why these areas had so much of that oil originally. Like some of the first pipelines for oil were built there, and similar to La Brea tar pits being off of La Cienega Boulevard, which literally in Spanish means the swamp. Okay. Right. It looks like so here there was
a swamp area. Right?
Yeah. And here's another another illustration right here that says the Great Black Swamp basically went from Toledo off of Lake Erie all the way to nearly Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Right.
Okay, keep going.
Okay, so take a look at that. Now, don't get rid of that one, but pull up another one and look up the Grand Kankakee Swamp.
Okay, wow, that's a really, really good spelling. So the Grand
Kankakee Swamp.
The Grand Kankakee Swamp.
Okay. I mean, and then just doing a simple Google search of the snakes in the heartland, you'll see tons of snakes.
And here's the Grand Kankakee Outwash Plain, which looks like it's the same as a swamp. Okay, that is at the bottom of what would be what, Lake Superior?
Lake Michigan.
Or Lake Michigan, okay.
Now they don't usually show these together, but if you put those two together, you have the Grand Kankakee Swamp and the Great Black Swamp, okay?
Okay.
They come within about 15 to 20 miles of each other. There's kind of a continental divide ridge that goes right through there that separates those two swamps by about 10 or 15 miles. If you have two swamps, now by the way, they were draining these swamps. The Great Black Swamp wasn't drained until after Joseph Smith's time. They were still draining portions of it in the 1800s.
Really?
So this swamp was still there, and and if you have two massive swamps that are literally, I would guess several hundred, if not, maybe even 1,000 square. Well, that wouldn't be 1,000 square miles, but it'd be like thousands and thousands of acres of swampland. What's the chances you might have a snake or two in there? And that's our narrow neck of land, as we say it. We believe that there's actually several necks of land. There's a small neck of land. There's a narrow neck of land. There's a narrow pass. Those are not all the same place. We think that they're all different individual places based on who's writing the history, and whether it's talking about Zarahemla or Bountiful or whatever. Okay, and we have all that. Jonathan Neville has, if you want to get his book, you can just go to our website, it's bookofmormonevidence.org, and pick up we have a book that has over 160 maps, okay, that Ryan Nelson and Jonathan Neville did. And it goes by book. So you can look up Mosiah, for example, in the Book of Mormon, and you can look up the 25 maps that go with the Book of Mosiah, or Alma, or Third Nephi, or whatever, right? So you can actually see how this actually fits the geography. But
so it looks like
there's plenty of snakes, and there's plenty of opportunity for snakes to have these massive swamps.
Okay, so I'm pulling up right now a map of the Great Lakes, okay? And, if we zoom in here, we know that the Great Black Swamp was coming out the bottom of Lake Erie.
Right there.
Okay, right here at the
Extending
bottom.
down to the south and west.
Extending down the south and west. And that's basically in the top chunk of Ohio. And then the other Great Swamp was at the bottom of Lake Michigan, basically going almost into the heart of Illinois. Okay. And those two are nearby. And you feel that could have produced the snakes necessary to actually have the great snake invasion of the Book of Mormon. All right. Okay. I'm sold on that. But on this map, point to me on this map where the narrow neck of land would be, because I'm seeing 15 candidates.
Yeah. Well, and that's the reason why there's not just one narrow neck. Okay. So, but it would be between.
So
Lake
there's not
Erie.
just one narrow neck. So you're not a two Cumorah truther, but a two narrow neck of land truther, huh? I see what's going on.
There's only one narrow neck of land. Those three words all combined into one phrase.
So you don't like the two Cumorah guys, but you got the two narrow necks, huh?
No. We don't have two narrow necks. We may have no.
I got no narrow neck, bro.
Yeah, I got a fat neck.
That's why I have the beard.
Yeah, dude, for real. Okay, so which one do you think is the narrow neck again? Which one?
Between Lake Erie, there, and Lake Michigan. When those two swamps existed back in the Book of Mormon time frames, they came within 15 miles of each other. And the interesting thing about the narrow neck of land, there's not a narrow neck of land in Central America that actually matches the description either. The Book of Mormon says that they could cross the narrow neck of land. A Nephite could cross a narrow neck of land in either one time it says a day, and the other time it says a day and a half. You show me any place in Mesoamerica where you're crossing from one ocean to the other. It says, in a day and a half. I mean, there is no place. Panama is almost 40 miles wide, and it was all swamps. And that's not where they even think it was.
And even any of the large highways that the Aztecs and the Mayans that people want to argue about, it wasn't just a day's travel to go from one place to another. It was several.
Yeah, when you look on the Sorensen model, and they suggest that maybe this river valley could have been the narrow neck of land because it went between two mountains instead of being
between two seas, like it says in the book.
If you travel north to west, I'm trying to steel man these guys. All right,
I understand.
But they make a solid argument that they always mention the sea northward, not westward. And so if the map is tilted this way, then you could see how traveling through these two mountains would mean the sea is over here and over here. So everything matches up linguistically, but you're correct about the time travel. I look at that map and I'm like, man, that'd be like 5 or 6 days on foot, man. I've done some pretty killer hikes, and I don't see how you do that in less than a week. Meanwhile, the Book of Mormon does say it was a day to a day and a half's journey away. Okay.
Right, but John Sorensen also said that the whole map has been shifted because apparently the Nephites were not quite educated enough to know which direction north, south, east, and west were, even though the sun comes up every morning in the east and goes down every morning in the west. So they have a potential lock on.
What did the Mesoamerican people do to you? Who hurt you, Rod? Who hurt you, Rod?
Listen,
so that you're like this, because you cannot just debunk these cats. You can't do it. Like it's like it's like a bad divorce court. You know what I'm saying? It's like, well, my cheating ex-wife who decided to leave with a bad guy that she said she'd never go back to.
I have trauma and I'm still recovering. It's like from my breakup.
Yeah. No, the thing is, I have no breakup, but the problem is that that's what we've bought into with the whole Mesoamerica thing. For all these years, we've said we haven't called out John Sorensen and said, wait a minute, your map really you have to basically make northeast and east-west and blah blah blah. I mean,
is he still alive? Even this poor John Sorensen
unfortunately,
guy?
now he knows the truth one way or the other.
For the record, John, I think you're a great guy.
Yeah, we do. John, I hope you're loving it up there. Let me tell you.
You know, just wow. Okay, well then here's one last question. Here's one last question.
Oh,
you got me on the snakes. Fine, you got me on the snakes.
Yeah. Okay.
What about that city that was so destroyed by the seismic activity and the destruction that it sank into the sea? Now, I've seen some compelling examples of, is this the Nephite Atlantis? Famously, David Snell did a super cool video on his faith and belief section saying, hey, fun food for thought here. This ancient Mayan or proto-Mayan city or Aztec city, I can't remember exactly what group he attributed it to, but there's famously that city that sank into the lake due to the seismic activity that they say could be the Mormon Atlantis, right?
Right.
What city are you pointing to on this Great Lakes region that's close enough to the narrow neck of land that could be the city that sunk into the sea because of all the destruction in the Book of Mormon?
Well, you have basically in Central America, you have Lake Atitlan, right? Which is what I think that's where they talk about having this sunken city, right?
Okay.
Okay, but the interesting thing is that if our geography is correct, then what you have is the New Madrid seismic zone, and you have Reelfoot Lake, which we already showed you is a very large lake.
Okay.
It said it was covered with water. Some of it talked about being covered with earth. Sometimes they said it was covered with water. Interestingly enough, what happened a lot of times, and this is actually was seen in 1811, 1812, when you have a massive shaking of the earth, these huge earthquakes, it actually causes the earth to settle down onto the aquifers down below. And it super pressurizes them, and so the water then comes squirting up through cracks in the earth, and sometimes it'll shoot up 100 feet high.
Wow,
massive
like a geyser
of water and sand and soil and everything else is just being blasted up out of the earth like that, and comes down and covers areas like that, right?
Yeah.
There were 7 different lakes that either weren't in existence before the 1811 and 1812 earthquakes, or that existed afterwards. In other words, several lakes actually, people were standing on the side of the lake, and all of a sudden the earth just opened up and the lake drained into the earth, and there was fish flopping in the mud where the lake used to be.
Whoa.
Okay. And then others had where like the Mississippi River that came in, and other places when that water squirted up out of the earth and made these geysers, they came down and formed other lakes. So if you have a 7 foot tall or 7 or 8 foot tall Hopewell mound builder, home, the water doesn't have to get very deep to basically be at least up to the ceiling, right? But all it really takes is about 3 or 4 feet of water, and you no longer can live there, right? I mean, you can't.
Yeah, it's a flood zone now.
It's a flood zone, right? And these whole areas of the interior of America became flood zones in 1811, 1812.
Yeah, but have you found the sunken city yet, man? Like what point
buried
on the map can you?
There are so many that
well, at least the Mesoamerican guides found their sunken Atlantis.
Well, they have one.
And they got the scuba equipment down there. I don't see you putting on a neoprene wetsuit and going into the frozen waters of Lake Erie. You know what I'm saying? You just want to say,
more
it's
fun.
sunken.
I gotta say, that would be more
sunken.
fun. It'd be an adventure.
Well, I mean, this is another reason why it's important to take a look at all of these geographical sites and start archaeological research projects to go actually see these things. I mean, there's enough evidence there to say, hey, we should put some people together and let's go search.
Yeah.
Let's go excavate and figure out what's there.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll tell you, the biggest problem is that there are so many of them that we could have 2 or 3 dozen possible candidates because there's so many of these things.
Okay.
And
because we know that it's sunk, then it's not going to be easily found on a map. Not any modern map.
You know.
Well, the other thing
sounds like a cope to me, bro.
Well,
no, I just.
Let's just briefly mention about building materials, because what were they made of in the Book of Mormon? How many stone temples are mentioned in the Book of Mormon, or stone buildings of any kind?
Not a lot, but they're visually represented that way in a lot of art. So that's kind of led into the zeitgeist of our church, the conceptualization of a temple. probably because we know that the temple was built similar to Solomon's temple, which we know was built out of stone. But just because Nephi said that it was built out of similar to Solomon's temple, it does specifically say it was far simpler. It was not as ornate. It was obviously the generic Kirkland signature version that was more practical and functional in a spiritual fashion than ornate and decorative. So does that preclude stone? I'm not sure. But does it open the possibility of it having been something else? Yes, especially knowing that, according to Don Bradley in the Lost 116 Pages, that Lehi had basically he had an ark, but the traveling temple, what was that called?
Tabernacle.
The tabernacle, yeah. That Lehi basically would have had his own tribal tabernacle, for lack of a better term.
Right.
So, okay, this is cool. Anything we didn't cover before we end this little cool section on plants and animals of the Book of Mormon, according to the Heartlander of Heartlanders, the chief of the Cumorah Truthers. You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
The Cumorah Truthers. Anything we missed?
Everything. We did not even touch on the plants yet.
Oh, geez. Okay. Well, then, you know what? We're just going to end this one right
about
here.
Half of it. So
we're just going to end
a deeper dive on the plants. Then.
We'll do the plants.
Awesome.
Okay. So this one will be the animals of the Book of Mormon. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments, guys. If you guys think this is just a bunch of holy hemispheric hogwash, propagated by a bunch of heretical Heartlanders, then let us know in the comments below.
And a Mesoamerican.
Yeah, but if you think this is just mesomania and that we need to really, mucus was the next word that came up as an alliteration. I don't know how to incorporate it, so I won't.
No.
But if you think this is just a bunch of Mesoamerican mucus, then let us know in the conversation. In the comments below. We'll continue the conversation there. As always, for this and more, please check us out at WardRadio.com.
I just feel so good. Oh, I just feel so good.
Guys, thanks for watching the video. Before you go, please make sure that you like the video, share it with your friends, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please let this be the video in which we earn your subscription, and that you press the alert button so you're alerted to all of our fun live streams and standalone videos and community posts. Also, if you'd like to help us out, please consider joining the channel. Members get all kinds of cool perks and benefits. They get early access to a lot of our videos and special emoticons and emojis during our live streams and preferential treatment there. It's a lot of fun. Speaking of a lot of fun, we have a super cool Discord. If you'd like to join our Discord, check us out on WardRadio.com. There's a link to the Discord there. Also, you can sign up there for our newsletter. Our newsletter is a lot of fun, and you can put your email address in there. And if you'd like to contribute to the program, please consider looking us up on Venmo or on the CashApp. We're on both of those platforms. Also, if you just want to keep watching more content, right about here and probably right about here are going to be some more videos. Please check those out. And as always, for this and more, please make sure that you look us up and check us out at WardRadio.com.